Welcome back to Faith Formation at Home. This is the third Sunday of Easter, and so we're continuing reading these resurrection appearances of Jesus in our Sunday Gospels. And so this week's it comes from the Gospel of Luke. And with a lot of these resurrection appearances, this one especially, we see Jesus really trying to show his disciples that he is actually alive again. He's got a real body. He's not just a ghost. He's not a figment of their imagination. He's not something that they are collectively hallucinating. He's an actual real person. They can touch his body and realize that there's some physicality to him. But it's interesting because in his resurrected body, he can walk through walls. They're hiding in this upper room, and all of a sudden Jesus shows up in there. So either he walked through the wall or he poofed into the room. Either way, pretty impressive stuff. But he has a physical body that they can touch. How does he do that? But in this resurrected body, he still has the nail marks in his hands, and he still has the spear mark in his side. It's the same body that hung on the cross that is now alive again. That's awesome. And we see Jesus trying over and over again to show his apostles, I am real. Give me something to eat. Ghosts don't eat food. I'm going to eat food. Right? And in the midst of this utterly real depiction of Jesus risen from the dead, he opens their minds to understand the scriptures, because he's got a mission for them. He's going to send them out to help other people understand those scriptures. But what he helps them to understand is God's been telling us for thousands of years that this is what's going to happen, that Jesus is going to come, he's going to suffer, he's going to die, and he's going to rise again. And it just didn't click for them until now. When Jesus opens their minds to understand the scriptures, they finally start to get it and realize, oh my goodness. And they're connecting all these dots from the biblical story, and all these things all of a sudden make a lot more sense. Because Jesus is alive, it all makes sense. So our Bible story for our little ones from the Jesus Storybook Bible, we're going to skip ahead in the liturgical year to Pentecost, the end of the Easter season. God sends help, right? So this is a story that we're not going to get to in Faith Formation at Home unless you keep reading through this Celebrating Sunday for Catholic Families after the end of April, which I would highly recommend that you do. But we're skipping ahead to Pentecost. Over these 50 days, even before these 50 days of Easter, at the Last Supper, Jesus is promising to send a helper, an advocate, the Holy Spirit. All right, and then this story is the story of that Holy Spirit finally coming. I love this story. We teach this in confirmation prep. It's an awesome story because these tongues of fire that show up. All right, the apostles experience God in a way that they don't even know how to describe it. And so they say, well, it was like a sound of rushing wind, and there were these things that were like tongues of fire, but they don't really even know how to describe it. I'm sure kids and parents, you've all experienced something where words don't come to you to describe it, especially kids, because sometimes your vocabulary is limited. You don't know how to talk about this awesome feeling that you have. That is exactly what the apostles are feeling when the Holy Spirit comes on them. And at the end of they're so excited that they run out and they just start telling everybody about Jesus. Whereas at the beginning of the story, they're scared and hiding. I'm sure you felt that way. And at the end of the story, you can't get them to keep quiet about Jesus. Right? That's how excited the Holy Spirit makes them feel. But at the end of this story, we meet a guy who's going to feature prominently in the next story, this guy named Saul, who is not happy with what's going on. He doesn't want people following Jesus. And then next week, we're going to see what happens with this guy named Saul. Our catechism for our older kids, we're continuing through this last section on prayer, and now we're looking specifically at what is the Rosary. Right? The Rosary is probably the most culturally identifiably Catholic thing out there. Right? One of these guys. You see these hanging on people's rearview mirrors. Sometimes you see people wearing them around their necks. It's not jewelry, they're prayer beads, but if that's how you have to carry your prayer beads, go for it. Right? If you've ever prayed the Rosary before, maybe you found it to be exciting, or maybe you found it to be boring. Either way, it's totally okay. There are saints on both ends of the spectrum. St. Dominic went around preaching the Rosary to everybody he knew. St. Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, always fell asleep while praying the Rosary. But she said it was okay because her guardian angel would finish it for her. Right? What is the Rosary? The nuts and bolts of the Rosary, you've got these sections of 10 beads, right? There's some other prayers at the beginning that the book will explain to you, but the basic building block of the Rosary is this unit here. 1 bead, 10 beads, 1 bead. What do you do with that? You pray an Our Father, 10 Hail Marys, and a Glory Be. And then you go around again, you do that again 5 times over to get around this whole thing. You do this whole thing 4 times, and you've done the entire Rosary. Most people don't do it that way. Right? So a 10 bead section, a 10 Hail Mary section is called a decade of the Rosary. And as you're praying that decade, you're supposed to be thinking about an event from Jesus' life. right? They call these the mysteries of the Rosary, which the UCAT questions are going to go into. What are these mysteries? These are the major events in Jesus' life: the joyful mysteries, the luminous mysteries, the sorrowful mysteries, and the glorious mysteries. If you can meditate on those 20 mysteries of the Rosary, you'll have the basic building block of the New Testament story memorized, right? And so the whole idea with the Rosary is these Hail Marys, this repetition over and over and over again. Didn't Jesus say something about don't pray with a lot of repetition as if God's going to hear you because of all your words? He did. But Jesus also prayed the Psalms, which are repetitious. When he's on the cross, he's praying Psalm 22, which is a bit of a repetitious psalm, right? So Jesus isn't against repetition. The point of the repetition in the Rosary is this: it's supposed to help block out everything else that's going on around you. These Hail Marys just wash over you so you can kind of clear your mind a bit to think about Jesus preaching the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus instituting the Eucharist, Jesus being born, Gabriel appearing to Mary, Jesus dying on the cross, Mary being assumed into heaven. Whatever mystery you're thinking about, the Hail Marys are supposed to just wash away everything else so you can focus on that. So you might try this at home. If 10 Hail Marys is too much, start smaller. In faith formation, we practice this with a large group of kids. We do just 3 Hail Marys at a time and just see how that felt. And then we build it up to 5, and then we try 10. So try it out, because 10 might be too much for you, especially if you're little. Shorten it, that's okay. But I encourage you to try to pray the Rosary. If you don't have a Rosary, at St. John and Paul in the upper CDC, we're going to have these in a basket. There's 2 different kinds, by the way. There's this big Rosary, and there's a little ring Rosary. So you can come pick those up. If you're in the Beaver Valley, shoot me an email, and we'll find a way to get you a Rosary. So we got rosaries laying around everywhere. I'd love you to have one, especially if you're going to pray it.